Welcome to the NFC West Huddle, where we break down all the big storylines across the division with experts in each city. I'm Alyssa Charleston in Seattle, joined by Richard Sines in Phoenix, Bailey O'Carroll in San Francisco, and Gerard Moncure in Los Angeles. Congratulations to us all. We made it through 3 preseason games. Now we have to wait for Sunday, September 8th, where all 4 teams start the regular season. Let's start with Bailey in San Francisco. I was tempted to make you give us a play-by-play of that crazy Hail Mary in Las Vegas against the Raiders, but it's too cruel. So instead, I just want to know what you learned about the 49ers after 3 preseason games.
Yeah, I think what we've learned about this team is that their 2024 draft class was one heck of a draft class, right? They've really shown out on both sides of the ball, offense, defense, but there are still so many question marks. I think we have at this point more question marks than answers after the preseason with the Niners. I know, we kind of talked about this. We still have BA and Trent, and then we still didn't see, like in that Saints game, the second preseason game, right? The Saints played so many of their key starters. The Niners really didn't do that at all this preseason. So, we haven't seen Fred Warner. We haven't seen Nick Bosa. We saw Brock Purdy a little bit, and the internet kind of blew up. Twitter blew up about his performance. But there's still a lot of question marks. What are these starters going to look like when the regular season rolls around? Will Trent Williams be there? Will Brandon Ayuk be there? But I think overall what we learned is that this is a deep team, which is obviously good. They are known to have a lot of injury issues, but that also they're going to be able to rely on this rookie class, which is huge.
And Richard, a pretty decisive win for the Denver Broncos over Arizona in their preseason finale as they go winless. What's your impression of the Cardinals right now?
Well, my impression is that they don't care about the preseason games. I think they treated the joint practice with the Colts as more of a preseason game than the other 3 combined, because the starters didn't play at all in the preseason. There was no Kyler Murray, there was no James Conner, not even Marvin Harrison Jr., the top pick for the Cardinals. He got 1 series in against the Saints in that first game, and after that they shelved him. He did play a lot against the Colts in those joint practices, and he shined. He showed what he could do. He was a smooth route runner, and a lot of the Colts fans were hoping he would play in that preseason game, of course, because his father, Marvin Harrison Sr., was a Hall of Famer for the Colts. So that's what I've learned, is that they were treating these joint practices, and I think a lot of teams in the NFL are starting to do that, have these joint practices to make up for the lack of one last preseason game. And a lot of times before, when they had 4 preseason games, that 3rd game was kind of like the dress rehearsal, right, where a lot of the starters played the first half, and now I think a lot of teams in the NFL aren't playing their starters at all. So the one thing I learned is like they're just treating the 3 preseason games as kind of an evaluation process for guys that are not starters.
Great way to keep your starters healthy. Well, let's go to Gerard in LA. Didn't seem to want to give anything away against the Houston Texans, did the Rams, in their finale. So how do you think the Rams feel about their roster after 3 preseason games?
I think they're really pleased with it. I think they're really happy. I mean, this is the Rams' way. They don't play anyone in the preseason. But if we're really honest with ourselves, you really have to see starters in game-like conditions to really see where you are. But I think Sean McVay has a pretty good idea. They know that they've got a lot of young talent. Wide receiver Jordan Whittington was spectacular in the preseason, as was undrafted rookie linebacker Omar Spates. Oh, I'm going to talk a little bit about him in a second. But there's no doubt they have a lot of young talent on this team, and the offense is really set to go. They're expected to be one of the best offensive teams in the league with Matthew Stafford behind a strong running game of Kyren Williams and Blake Corum. We all know what he did at Michigan, led them to a national title. The Rams picked up Jonah Jackson in the offseason to solidify that offensive line that already has veteran guys on that line, guys that played a lot of snaps last year. So they know where they are, along with, of course, one of the best receiving tandems in the league in Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp. Defensively, early draft picks, Jared Verse and Braden Fisk, already look like they're ready for prime time with what we saw in the inter-team scrimmages. They didn't play in the preseason games, but Sean McVay, defensive coordinator Chris Shula, saw enough in those scrimmages to know what they had already. Of course, they did lose Aaron Donald for now. We're going to leave that door open, because it wouldn't surprise me at like week 13 to see him come back. It just, when he was around practices and these type of things. But what is surprising is what happened this past week. They traded the defensive signal caller and captain, Ernest Jones IV, to Tennessee for just a 6th-round pick because they did not want to give him an extension. They wanted him to play through his rookie contract. He and his representative did not want to do that, so the trade happened. Now, he was the captain of the defense. That's how much faith they have in Omar Speights, who was undrafted, who's going to take his position starting at the linebacker position. So we have an idea of what they are by what we've seen in these inter-squad scrimmages, but now we've got to play the games to really get the, I guess, the full reveal is the way I'll put it.
Gerard, I have to follow up with you on that. Are you saying there's a chance Aaron Donald comes out of retirement?
I am not putting that out of the question at all. I'm really not. We saw him multiple times at training camp. He looks in great shape. I saw him on tape beat LaShawn McCoy in a race in an alley. Yeah, that Shady McCoy. He's in great shape. That's who he is. I'm just saying, don't be surprised if it happens in the last third of the season.
Well, that just ruined everyone's season, hearing that one of the best defensive players in the history of the game might be returning. We'll keep that in our back pockets. Thank you so much, Gerard. I think what we learned about the Seahawks and Mike Macdonald is that they wanted to see their starters in this 3rd preseason game and that preseason game only, and only for the first drive. The first team offense and defense saw one drive alone against the Cleveland Browns last week. The biggest piece of news was that the Hawks' top edge rusher, Uchenna Nwosu, sprained his MCL on the 4th play from scrimmage on a chop block. He's not on the injured reserve list, so there was optimism yesterday from the Seahawks GM that there's an outside chance he could be back for week 1, but it's more likely weeks 2 or 3. And that first team defense only gave up 6 net yards to the Browns in that first drive where they punted. Offensively, it was our first and only chance to see quarterback Geno Smith in the game-like situation with this new offense. He seemed super comfortable, and it took him just under 2 minutes to find DK Metcalf in the end zone for a touchdown. The defender actually fell down, so DK, that's a guy who can catch a pass in any situation, but basically wide open. That drive included a perfect pass to Jackson Smith-Njigba on a slot fade route. It was a beautiful pass from Geno Smith, who went 4 of 5 in that drive, but it's too hard to take that seriously because even with former offensive coordinator Shane Waldron last year, they'd look like world beaters in the first 2 drives, and then they'd stall out for like 2 or 3 quarters. So we have a lot to wait and see when it comes to that offense. I think there's a lot of excitement just from that first drive alone. All right, everyone cut down their rosters to 53 players Tuesday of this week. So I'm curious if there were any surprises on each team. Let's go back to Los Angeles. Gerard, was there any major news from cutdown day?
No, I think, the biggest surprise to me was Boston Scott not making the Rams team. They picked him up in the offseason to kind of be a 3rd running back behind Kyren Williams and Blake Corum, and that's not when it ended up happening. Zach Thomas was on the practice squad, but right now the Rams are going basically with Blake Corum and Kyren Williams. Kyren Williams, of course, had a great year last year running the ball, and he missed a few games. He was I believe, the 4th leading rusher in the league in the regular season last year. So they're confident with those 2 guys, and that's what we're going to see. But other than that, in the trade of Ernest Jones IV this week, those are the 2 big surprises coming out of Rams camp as they trim the rosters down.
And Richard, what about the Cardinals?
Well, I'm still trying to wrap my mind around Aaron Donald coming back. I mean, Gerard striking fear in our hearts here, saying that this monster's coming back right when we thought he was gone. So, during when I wasn't on, I called Larry Fitzgerald. He's going to come back, Gerard. How about that? He will come back if Aaron Donald comes back in week 13. So they're going to try to combat you guys there. So we got some guys that could come back too. Okay, Larry Fitzgerald might walk through that door. All right. Anyway, let's go back to the cuts. Yeah, one of the surprising cuts to me was Michael Carter, the running back for the Arizona Cardinals, a guy that was very familiar with Jonathan Gannon and his style. They were together in Philadelphia, and he's a guy that has NFL experience and experience within the system. He didn't make the cut. He's now on the practice squad. So that was really interesting. One of those head scratchers, like, wow, okay. And then also tells me that Trey Benson, the rookie, the 3rd-round pick out of Florida State, who got a good long look in the preseason, got plenty of carries, has proven he can be that handcuff to James Conner, who's going to be the bell cow for the Arizona Cardinals. So there's a lot of depth, and it's funny, you know, over the years you've seen the culture kind of change for this Cardinals franchise. Once Jonathan Gannon and Monty Ossenfort have taken over, they've had 2 really good drafts, and you can see that they've had to let go of some good players, and that's a sign of a team that's getting better when there's guys you're like, man, I hope nobody else picks him up because I know he can play in this league.
That is a great point. Bailey, in San Francisco, please tell me that Jerry Rice nor Joe Montana is suiting up and hanging out around training camp over there.
I didn't see any of them. No promises. I never say never. I've learned that. But I do feel confident maybe saying never in this situation, at least for Joe Montana. That's what I'll say. But one of the kind of surprises, I think the Niners are just a very continuous team. They value kind of, right, nothing really changing, and if it's not broken, don't fix it, right? They lost in the Super Bowl last year, but they did make it to the Super Bowl. So there's been no huge roster shakeups this year, and in this 53-man roster, there wasn't anything super shocking. They do have 7 wide receivers, if you do include Brandon Ayuk. Of course, we are still waiting to see what is going to happen with him. But all but one of their draft picks made this 53-man roster. There we go. So again, just no big surprises coming out of this cut. And Kyle Shanahan likes to call it the first 53-man roster, not the final 53-man roster. So of course, everybody's always changing things and stuff like that. But I think it does go to show just how good of a draft that the Niners did have and how happy they are with those rookies throughout the preseason, how they kind of performed on the field and also throughout camp as well. But again, big question marks still remaining for the Niners are just that Brandon Ayuk and Trent Williams. Will we see them week 1? Will we not? Those are kind of the big things happening, not necessarily with the 53-man roster. We know that those guys, at least Brandon Ayuk is on the 53-man roster, but that is kind of what Niners fans and all the talk about this team is right now.
Crazy saga that we will continue to follow. Well, since the start of this show, the Seahawks have probably traded for a linebacker. It felt like they added one every day this week, most recently trading for Trevis Gibson from Jacksonville on Monday, likely adding depth with Nwosu possibly being out to start week 1 and maybe week 2. In terms of cuts, the surprises both ended up on their 17-man practice squad anyway. Undrafted running back out of Boise State, George Halani, was an unexpected cut just because offensive coordinator Ryan Grubb and Mike McDonald raved about all the pass protect skills he has. But Kenny McIntosh was their draft pick last year. He's the Seahawks' 3rd running back for right now. The other was offensive lineman McClendon Curtis. He's really versatile, can play several positions on the offensive line, and has more experience than the other guys they kept. But again, he's on the practice squad as well, so no huge surprises for the Seahawks. We have so much more to learn about every team coming up on the NFC West Huddle. After the break, what remains the biggest question mark on each team heading into the regular season? We'll be right back. Welcome back to the NFC West Huddle, where we are less than a week away from the start of the NFL season. I'm asking each expert in each city, what's the biggest question you still have about the team you cover after 3 preseason games? Gerard, we'll start with you and the Rams in Los Angeles.
Got to be exactly how good the run game is going to be, because if the run game is good, Matthew Stafford's going to be unstoppable. Matthew Stafford in his 3 seasons with the Rams has never had a spectacular run game. The best the Rams have been is 11th. The year they went to the Super Bowl, they were 24th. So that just shows you, if they're able to run the ball with this now experienced offensive line, with Kyren Williams, who gained, I told you he was the 4th leading rusher in the league last year, and he only only ran the ball in 12 games. He missed 5 games last year. And Blake Corum, if they can run the ball better than they have done in the past, the sky's the limit for this offense.
All right, Bailey in San Francisco, what is the biggest question mark for the 49ers?
Oh, we've got 2. We've got a kind of double-edged sword here. We've got Brandon Ayuk and Trent Williams. When will they join the team? We don't know is the answer. I want to focus on kind of Brandon Ayuk first. BA, Adam Schefter saying that he's never seen a situation as unpredictable as the one happening right now between BA and the 49ers. And then Trent, of course, also holding out. But again, the big thing just happening yesterday John Lynch saying, then I'm reading quote here, at some point you have to play. So they want him to be out there, of course, for that season opener, that week 1 game against the Jets. Will it happen? We don't know. At this point, it's a little up in the air. We're kind of saying, like, if he wanted the money, he would have taken the offer months ago to go to the Patriots. So I think he wants to be on a team that can contend for a Super Bowl, but I think he wants his cake and wants to eat it too. Now, at some point, there will have to be some sort of a give and take here if that deal ultimately does get done. The same thing with Trent Williams. He wants that guaranteed money. But guys, I did go back and look. When did this Nick Bosa deal get done last year? That wasn't until September 6th. So by that standard, by that timeline, they do still have time to make these deals happen. Will they be there for week 1? Kyle Shanahan saying he is preparing as if both of those guys will not be out there on the field. So those are the 2 big question marks remaining.
Very interesting, because both of them know the offense and could step in pretty much immediately, I'm sure. All right, Richard, in Arizona, what about the Cardinals?
Well, for me personally, it's back to Brandon Ayuk because he's on my fantasy team. The Chimichangas need to know, are we going to have Brandon Ayuk week 1? But anyway, never mind my personal interest, right, in Brandon Ayuk. But when it comes to the Cardinals, it's stopping the run. That was their Achilles heel last year. It kind of reared its head in the preseason where, you know, the Broncos, the Colts ran the ball on them at will. And when you look at the division, you know, you talked about Williams and Blake Corum. You talk about, you know, Christian McCaffrey, the best running back in the league. And you talk about, you know, Kenneth Walker, an underrated running back, in my opinion. That's how you're going to win in this division, is stopping those guys and stopping the run and putting quarterbacks in obvious passing situations, then putting pressure on the quarterback. And another, you know, big bummer for the Cardinals was Darius Robinson, the other first-round pick out of Missouri, who was having a great training camp and a great preseason, has an injured calf, is on the IR designated to return list, which means he can come back after week 4. And that was a big blow to this defense because stopping the run and getting to the quarterback still remain the big question marks for this team.
All right, Brandon, stop being so selfish. The Chimichangas need you. Over here in Seattle, it's the offensive line is the biggest question mark. There's more hope than there's been in at least 5 years, with Scott Huff becoming the new offensive line coach and then Ryan Grubb becoming the new offensive coordinator. Remember, Michael Penix and the Huskies were an unbelievably explosive offense, and Michael Penix was able to show off his arm. I think Geno Smith wants to show off his deep ball capability this year. He was one of the best in the NFL last year. If you look at the statistics, he's just not a runner, and he's not as much of an over-the-middle kind of passer. So if he has the protection of an offensive line and has time, like Michael Penix did for the most part of last year, with the best offensive line in the country in college football, Geno Smith is going to have a much more fun year. You also have Connor Williams, who the Seahawks signed as a free agent coming out of Miami. He's coming off a torn ACL, and they really need a solid center because Olu Oluwatimi just hasn't won that battle. They're also waiting to see if right tackle Abe Lucas, who started 16 games as a rookie right tackle 2 years ago, will be back this year. It seems like there's hope he could come back this season, but we know for sure he's out for the first 4 games of the season. Well, coming up, ESPN asked over 100 current NFL players about the best quarterbacks in the league, who's overrated, underrated, best trash talker, all of it. And 2 NFC West quarterbacks made one list, so we're playing fair or foul next. It's time for Fair or Foul here on the NFC West Huddle. ESPN polled over 100 NFL players, asking them to rank the best quarterbacks in the league, the most overrated and the most underrated QBs, along with the best trash-talking QB. That actually went to Buffalo Bills' Josh Allen, takes the crown for that title. But 49ers QB Brock Purdy and Rams quarterback Matthew Stafford tied for first as the most underrated quarterbacks in the league. So I want to start with Bailey in San Francisco. Do you think that vote for Brock Purdy is fair or foul?
I'm going to say it's fair, but this is something I kind of feel very strongly about, right? We've all seen it since he got in his rookie year. Everybody's kind of looking down on Brock. Oh, he's only as good because of all the talent around him, but he does have that talent around him. So we don't know how he would play if he didn't have a Deebo Samuel, if he didn't have a George Kittle. And I think his talent might get overshadowed a little bit by the fact that his coach is the offensive genius that is Kyle Shanahan. But I think he is underrated. You know, we look back last season and he was very heavily involved in that MVP talk, at least up until kind of the playoffs last year. So yeah, I think it's fair.
All right, Gerard, do you think Rams quarterback Matthew Stafford is the most underrated QB? Fair or foul?
I think it's fair. People completely underestimate Matt Stafford. They forget about his 12 seasons in Detroit. He was an elite guy for probably 9 of those when he was healthy. He gets a bad rap because they didn't win a playoff game, but the rest of the team was not that good. And then he comes to a team that's got some talent, and what happens? He wins a Super Bowl in his first season with the Rams. People never talk about this, but if Matt Stafford, if the Rams are as good as people think they're going to be this year, and they win the Super Bowl, Matt Stafford is going to Canton. He's going to be in the Hall of Fame if he wins 2 Super Bowl titles. Bottom line.
I love those kind of takes, and he has been really interesting to watch, especially over the past season. Richard, I'm going to ask you, because of both these quarterbacks, about Purdy and Stafford. Is it fair or foul that they tied for most underrated QB?
Yes, fair, big time fair. I mean, I agree with Gerard. You know, if you can win in Detroit and you take that team that had no business going to the playoffs, that is a victory in itself. And then you look at what he did when he got to LA and he had talent around him. Brock Purdy, Mr. Irrelevant. Nobody liked him. Nobody wanted to draft him. The 49ers pick him with the last pick of the draft, and look what he's done. He's been proving people wrong. He was underrated back then. And, of course, I've got a little soft spot in my heart because he's from Arizona here. He was played at Gilbert Perry High. He's a Puma. I used to wear Pumas when I breakdanced back in the day. So I like Brock Purdy, and for obvious reasons, though. He was one heck of a quarterback in high school, college, and the pros, and he continues to win at every level.
Well, we're stepping outside of the NFC West for this one. No team in NFL history has ever won the Super Bowl 3 years in a row. Players voted Patrick Mahomes as the best current quarterback in the league. Will he lead the Kansas City Chiefs to their 3rd straight Super Bowl win and some history? Bailey, back to you. Is that fair or foul?
Yeah, there's one thing I've learned from watching Patrick Mahomes' career is to never bet against him. So I'm going to say, yes, I do think that they could three-peat for the first time in the history of the NFL, just because it's Patrick Mahomes. And it seems like any time you're like, he could never do that, he does it. So you just can't bet against him in my book.
Okay, Gerard, fair or foul?
I am going to say it is foul. There's a reason no one has three-peated in this league. That's how hard it is. Very few teams have ever just gone back-to-back. The Chiefs have had plays go their way, and they have stayed fairly healthy in their skill positions. The odds in the NFL just catch up with you when you've had injury-free seasons enough to help you get to the Super Bowl. Forget about winning it. So I'm going to say not happening this year. Okay. Too much parity in the league, too.
Okay. Richard, quickly, fair or foul?
Yeah, I'm going to say foul because of one word: defense. Defense wins championships. When you look at the teams that had a chance to three-peat, the Steelers, the Dolphins back in the day, they all hung their hat on defense. The Chiefs don't hang their hat on defense. And when you look at the AFC, it's tough. You've got the Bills. You've got Lamar Jackson now has Derrick Henry. You have Joe Burrow, who's kind of the Achilles heel for the Chiefs, who's healthy. So too much competition in the AFC and not enough defense for the Chiefs.
This one's a tough one for me. I'm just going to go with fair because I love Andy Reid. I love that he loves cheeseburgers. We all love cheeseburgers. And they've got Travis Kelce and Taylor Swift on their side. I think Patrick Mahomes is such a freak athlete. You watch quarterbacks on Netflix. The things he does to stay healthy and to rehab is unbelievable. And they also added some receivers that they didn't have last year. Remember, they made it to the Super Bowl with their receiving core having more drops than any other receiving core in the league. And they still got there because Patrick Mahomes really willed them later on. They did lose some defensive pieces. They tried to fill them. So I'm curious to see what will happen there. But they kept Chris Jones, which I think is really important. We're closing out this NFC West huddle after the break by previewing everybody's Week 1 opponents as the regular season is right around the corner. All right, let's put a bow on our 3rd NFC West huddle of the season by looking ahead to the regular season. Every team in this division opens their season on Sunday, September 8th. Richard Sines, the Arizona Cardinals, will beat the Bills in Buffalo to start the season if what?
Josh Allen has a really bad day, and the Cardinals defense ends up scoring a touchdown or special teams kind of touchdown. The stars have to align for the Cardinals to win on the road at Buffalo against a really talented Bills team. So a lot of things have to go right for the Cardinals. A lot of things will have to go wrong for the Bills. And Josh Allen will have to have one of the worst games of the year for him, because that team is tough. And I think that's one of the teams that's going to, compete with the Chiefs to win the Super Bowl this year.
Bailey O'Carroll, the San Francisco 49ers will get a win over the New York Jets in San Francisco if they do what?
I think if they can tune out the outside noise, but I think also if Nick Bosa can do what Nick Bosa does best, right? I think Aaron Rodgers is going to be pretty rusty. Obviously, he was out all of last season. So if Nick Bosa can get Nick Bosa type of pressure on Rodgers, I think that'll really disrupt the Jets offense and I think give the Niners that first win at home this season.
Gerard Moncure, the LA Rams will start their season with a win in Detroit over the Lions if what?
If they run the ball successfully and protect Matthew Stafford and allow him to throw the ball in front of the chains, in play action, when it's not a predictable situation, because he's deadly in those second and short throws, particularly downfield. He's incredibly accurate. And on the defensive side of the ball, it's the exact opposite. They have to make Jared Goff throw the ball in predictable situations. Jared Goff, of course, used to be the Rams quarterback, and that's when Jared Goff makes mistakes, when he has to throw the ball, and everyone watching on TV knows he's throwing the ball.
And I think the Seahawks will beat the Denver Broncos in Seattle if they win the middle 8. I got that from Deion Sanders, actually. The last 4 minutes of the first half, the first 4 minutes of the second half, because the Seahawks at times might as well have not even come out of halftime because they were just flat. So if they can do that with under a new head coach, Mike McDonald, and get after a rookie quarterback in Bo Nix, well, that'll help their defense in a big way. That'll do it for this week's NFC West Huddle. Thanks to all 3 of you for joining us and for everybody watching at home. We'll be back next Friday at 7:30. Have a great night.